right, welcome back to Roll the Roll. We have a impromptu Saturday session. It's very bright and sunny here, but probably not where our special guest is joining us from, because there is a vast difference in time zones. My name's Heather. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me, I am Fish Food in our Discord and Fish Food here usually when we're streaming. And with me today is Matthew Dawkins. I'm sure a lot of you recognize his name. If you are the least bit familiar with World of Darkness and some of the stuff that we've run here before. Thank you very much for joining us. We definitely appreciate it. We're here to talk about Onyx Path's new content, the Mummy the Curse second edition, which is being wildly kickstarted right now. And just as a side note, I've covered a lot of Kickstarters before. I've never seen so many comments and like back and forth discourse on a Kickstarter, so that's great. This is a little different for Roll the Roll. We usually stream gaming sessions. We've never done, and we have had creators in our games before and in our chats, but we've never sat down and just had a chat with somebody. So again, thank you for being here. Thanks for being our guinea pig, so to speak. And if you want, I'll let you introduce yourself, so our chat knows who you are.
That's all right. I will interfere constantly. I'm a terrible guest, and as your guinea pig, you should know that I will ruin this episode.
Perfect.
Ruin the cage, soil everything. So anyone watching, thank you very much. My name is Matthew Dawkins. I'm the World of Darkness line developer for Onyx Path Publishing. I write as a freelancer and develop games as a freelancer for a whole multitude of companies. And some of the games that I'm working on right now include Mummy the Curse second edition, which, as mentioned, is currently on Kickstarter, and Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, as well as, again, all kinds of games. I've worked on Call of Cthulhu, Modern Age, a lovely folk horror RPG that's coming out soon called Solemn Veil. They came from Beneath the Sea via Onyx Path, which is probably my favorite. And yeah, I think I've now worked on every World of Darkness game that's come out for 20th Anniversary Edition, and have been doing this for 6 years now, and the last couple of years full time. So that's me.
And longer than that, you are otherwise known as the Gentleman Gamer, and you've put out a whole slew of content and coverage about all of the games before you got involved in writing them. Mm-hmm. How did that start?
Well, so the Gentleman Gamer channel started, I guess, around a decade ago, maybe longer than a decade, good God. And the reason that started was in the, I guess, heyday of vlogging on YouTube, where anyone with a camera would just pick one up and start doing vlogging about a subject. I was trying to find video reviews of tabletop RPGs, and there were only 2 channels that were doing them at the time. Their names were Pugnose Pro and Captain Machine, if memory serves. And I remember thinking when I was watching them, these aren't very good. No offense. They weren't to my taste. So I thought I can do them better because I was arrogant, and probably still am. And the difference was where Pugnose Pro would do like a read through of the contents of a book and do a smattering of what a role-playing game might contain, and Captain Machine, if I remember, would just talk about his favorite games. I would try and really break down games long form. And so my videos, I guess, infamously became long, quite rambly at times, definitely without a script. I never had edits in my videos, and it would just be me talking and talking and talking. And for whatever reason, it became quite popular for a time. I guess they're still popular to a degree now. And I moved on to do Gentleman's Guide to Vampires, which is probably what my channel is now most famous for. And I did the Pentex Guide to Werewolves. I've done the Gentleman's Guide to Requiem Vampires too. But yeah, initially it was just a review channel and a video game let's play channel. I used to do let's plays of things like XCOM, Terror from the Deep, and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, a whole bunch of some games that were well known, some that were obscure, just things I enjoyed. So yeah, that was the YouTube channel, and I've started uploading content to it again quite recently, in fact. So yeah, that was my, I guess, genesis in terms of getting involved in the role-playing game community outside of my local group. It was by putting myself on camera and talking about things that I love and trying to get more and more people into them.
And admittedly, those videos were, they served as a lot of my introduction when I started to pick up Vampire. And then when I went to run my own game, when I had people that were new to it, I would share your videos because they were a great introduction and kind of like very digestible way to learn about that world without having to pick up the book, especially if you played it after the physical books stopped being printed and they were just not accessible. So if you didn't want a PDF or you didn't want to heft around one of the books, like one of the ones behind you, they are excellent books, but they are big. They're big books, especially I've got V5 and all of the companion books, and they are hefty books.
Oh yeah, and there are books that are even more dense than that. And yeah, it was things like the Guide to Vampires. It was a way of highlighting what I felt were the highlights of various clans in Vampire, and sometimes some of the concepts in Vampire the Masquerade that people struggled with, like what is the beast or what is humanity, things like that. And yeah, that really seemed to go down well, to the point that when V5 was being released, White Wolf, I was already working for White Wolf as a writer, but they wanted to bring the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires back to do promos for V5. And that was nice because it had been a few years since I'd last done a video like that. And they gave me a little money, and I went out to a graveyard and at a church in a local village and recorded some videos. And people swore in the comments that I had a green screen behind me. But I didn't. I'm incredibly lacking in the technology skill. So I just go on location and again record these 30-minute stream of consciousness videos without any edits, without blinking. And yeah, I just pretend to be a vampire for a while until I run out of things to say.
Hey, you know what? Whatever works.
Yeah.
And all of that led into not only your very impressive resume, but you're also a 2-time Origin Award winner. So there's that too.
I might
you
be.
Are, unless your website is lying. In that case, you might want to update that.
No, I probably am. I remember, so Vampire the Masquerade obviously won an Origin Award, and I decided, yep, I'm having that. At least for the website. I'm sure something else won one as well. I put it somewhere. Oh, so many awards, I lose track. I've
what to do with them all?
I've even got a silver Ennie up here. You can't see it. That's Red Moon Role Playing, admittedly, but they were kind enough. They said, you've basically been a fourth host for us. It's a popular role-playing game podcast, much like yours, and they won an Ennie Award last year, or this year, and were kind enough to get an additional medal made up and sent out to me, so that was nice of them.
It's always good to be recognized for hard work.
Yeah.
So we wanted to chat a little bit today about Mummy the Curse 2nd edition. As I mentioned, the Kickstarter is just crazy successful. I think you guys have already blown past your original goal. You're pushing, last I checked, which was just a little while ago, over $45,000, I think, in funding.
Yeah, that's always good.
Yeah. And I've covered a lot of Kickstarters, and the comments and just the engagement on there is unlike anything that I've ever seen, even for some bigger creators, like with the comic book publishers. When they kickstart things, people are glad to back it, but there's not as much excitement for something to come out. And I noticed that is very like the Onyx Path tabletop roleplay community. Everybody just likes to be very engaged and gets super pumped up for stuff. So,
oh, definitely. I mean, if I may,
yeah,
our fans, so the Onyx Path community, are sometimes rabid for games. I mean, especially when it comes to Mage the Ascension and Mage the Awakening, but that's another story. Even for Mummy the Curse, and Mummy the Curse is a fairly niche game in the Chronicles of Darkness. The amount of enthusiasm that has risen up for this game's Kickstarter has been fantastic, and all credit to James, our Kickstarter manager, for being so reactive and proactive for that matter. He responds to pretty much every single comment. The writers and the developer, in this case myself, try to get involved as well, and if people have major concerns, we do our best to address them during the course of the Kickstarter, because it's something I can't take credit for. It's very much an Onyx Path mantra that we always engage the audience and we try and find out what they want. And as long as it's not to the detriment of the game, we certainly listen and try and incorporate their feedback. So yeah, I'm really pleased you've noticed that, because it's something we try and do with so many of our projects.
And it's unique when you're able to do that from a fan perspective, because you think of things that are wildly popular, like movies, and especially like Marvel, the superhero movies. There's no way that Marvel creators are hanging out in comments on campaigns and in Twitter looking for things to improve their product. But with Kickstarters and tabletop roleplay games, to be able to see the influence as it is created is neat for a fan. So
oh, no, I'm glad you think so.
On the note of Mummy, if you had to give your elevator pitch for what it is for someone that has never been exposed to it, like myself, before I started looking into it, what would you say and how would you sell it?
Oh, well, first and foremost, I'm dreadful at elevator pitches. But so let's assume that this is a utility elevator traveling very slowly up a skyscraper. So in Mummy the Curse, you are playing immortals that were made immortal thousands of years ago in a proto-ancient Egyptian civilization. You were created to be eternal slaves, essentially, to cosmic deities, and you will be woken up periodically throughout time to serve them, to serve your cults, or because your tomb has been interfered with, maybe robbed, or maybe a great act of necromancy or a war took place over your tomb and the bloodshed caused you to wake up. But either way, a lot of the time you spend your time sleeping or in Duat, the land of the dead, which you can roleplay in Mummy. Other times you're being woken up and you're interacting with the land of the living. And when a mummy first wakes up, they possess godlike powers. They are at their most raw and powerful, but they lack memory. They may not know who they are, where they are, or indeed when they are, or who this person is that's waking them. And so you can do things like pull meteors out of the sky, you can summon storms to strike down your enemies, you can set forth a carnivorous plague of beetles, but you may not know much. Now, as you spend more and more time awake and in service to your judge, your god, and your cult, your memory will go up, but your power, your sechem, as it's called in Mummy, will reduce. What that means is you find out more and more about yourself, about the mystery of your awakening. And at its heart, I would say Mummy the Curse is a mystery horror game, because every time you wake up, there's a fresh mystery to solve. You end up reaching a point where you can remember everything, but you are physically not as powerful. You aren't necessarily as capable of solving these things by yourself. So you have to use your cult. And in Mummy the Curse, just as mummies are playable, cultists are playable. And cultists can also be various forms of immortal. They can be sorcerers. They can be all kinds of things that serve you for all kinds of reasons. And now, one of the things I really love about Mummy is that inversion of power. the fact that it's one of the only role-playing games I know of where you start off more powerful than you will ever be at any other point. And by the time you have been playing for a month or two, your power level has reduced, but your knowledge has increased.
Okay.
And it's not like you will lose that power forever, because when you sleep and you wake up again, you will regain that power. It will just be another time, another place. And something I particularly love about second edition is that you don't necessarily wake up in a chronologically linear order. Just because you last slept in 550 CE during the plague of Justinian in Constantinople, the next time you wake up, maybe 1066, Battle of Hastings, but it could be prior to that. And you may be thinking, where does time travel fit into this? Mummies, their consciousnesses, their souls, exist at all points in time. They are essentially planted into their bodies, their hosts, by their judges or by their cults when they are most needed. And to them, time is not just a straight line. And you may think, why would a mummy not just in 200 BCE come up with the design for the Ferrari or the Apple Mac? And the fact is, you don't remember that initially. You don't remember the fact that you were last awake in 2019. But by the time you do have the memory, you can't necessarily design the Apple computer yourself. But what you can do is start seeding that knowledge into your cult. So when your cult does reach that time in history or in the future, they can apply that knowledge. They can invest in the right companies. They can get ahead of the curve in technology. They can make themselves wealthy and powerful, which of course results in them having more faith and belief in you and more inclined to serve you. So it's sort of self-fulfilling, but it also adds to the mystery and allows you to play a time-hopping game where you can set one game in the Renaissance, another game in the Dark Ages, another game during the fall of the Roman Empire, whenever you like. So yeah, that's Mummy the Curse.
So how does that play into character creation then? If you're coming into a game and if you have are they storytellers in Mummy, or what is the name of the person that's running the campaign, similar to like a dungeon master or?
Yep, so it is a storyteller in Mummy the Curse, and the first time you create a mummy, you will create that mummy using, I guess, starting level experience, which will be as per the book. And the good thing is, because of the non-linearity side of it, you can have your character wake up at any point, and that point in time could be your mummy's first time awake since being made a mummy. So it doesn't matter that you have starting level of experience. It could be 2019, it could be 1666, it could be 600 BCE. Your character has starting level experience because that's the first time you have ever been awake. Now, the next time you're awake could be prior to that, could be after that. But that's something you will play through. When you set your game is, of course, between the storyteller and the players. They may collaborate, or they may leave it to be a complete surprise and something for your mummy to actually work out during the course of the game, or mummies, because you often play this with a group of people. It's, again, part of the mystery to solve.
So you could have potentially a storyteller that throughout the life of a campaign will want you to wake up time and time again and really throw things for a loop with different time periods. That would be crazy.
Yeah, and imagine, let's say, I mean, one of the best examples I have when I was playtesting this edition of the game is it's a favorite scenario of mine. It's where when you wake up, your tomb is being robbed, you're immediately being assaulted by another mummy and their cult.
Oh no.
You don't know why, but you know that there is a passionate bond between you, an instinctive one. You can't identify exactly what, because you don't have the memory for it, but you will fight back with everything you have. Your cult is in danger, you're in danger, so you fight back. And this goes on until your power has decreased and the opposing mummy's power has decreased, but each of your memories has increased. And you realize at that point, the reason you feel such a passionate link with each other is because, let's say you were brothers or sisters when you were mortal. The reason you have a link is because you were lovers, maybe, or something like that. It was an emotional bond, and you just couldn't explain it. It was like a condition that you were suffering. You had a feeling that you just could not find the words, the thoughts to express. And when you finally are able to express it, the damage has been done. One of your cults has been annihilated. And you and the other mummy meet and you say, we need to ensure that this doesn't happen again, because I have a feeling that every time we've woken up, we are at each other's throats and we just don't know why. And so in those last waking nights, before you slump back into the land of the dead, as mummies inevitably do, you're a race against time now. You are trying to educate your cult. You're trying to tell them, make sure that the next time I wake, I am told, I am completely informed. You're writing down notes. You're scratching hieroglyphics into the walls of your tomb. So the next time you wake, you don't make the same mistake again. But at the same time, you accept the tragedy of your condition, that you are probably doomed to repeat the same cycle over and over again. As a single narrative, I think that's incredibly strong, has echoes of Memento, the Guy Ritchie movie, and various other time loop style movies and TV episodes, that kind of thing. And I think it's something you can do with Mummy that completely divorces it from all the esoterica of the judges and what they have planned for you, your origins. You can make it purely personal horror, just like you can with Vampire or Werewolf, or indeed any other Chronicles of Darkness game.
Kind of the beauty of tabletop roleplay in general is you're able to customize it and fit it to your players. There was a comment in chat from Onyx Path that likened the game, if Dr. Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap was a piece of desiccated beef jerky, that's sort of how Mummy works.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, that you will have a guide, maybe your Sadiq, which is an immortal servant, who is going to tell you a little bit about where you are now, but is probably just as clueless as you. Or you may be looking for cosmic signs from your judge. You're looking for a sign, but ultimately you've got to work out yourself.
So in the comments in the Kickstarter, there was a lot of conversation around character creation, specifically the differences between first and second edition. People seem to be very receptive to some of the changes they've seen. How does character creation differ between the two editions?
Well, actually, this is an interesting point. It's the first time it's come up in an interview, because what we do at Onyx Path, when we do a Kickstarter, we release the book chapter by chapter as a manuscript to the backers. And first chapter of Mummy, incredibly well received. Second chapter, really well received. Third chapter, a bit more controversial. And something I did as the developer of this book, I have really loaded it up with different setting possibilities. I've tried to make it more accessible. I've introduced more antagonists than previously. Not just me, the writers, of course, have all done a fantastic job on it. But due to word count constraints, quite frankly, what that resulted in is a slightly more limited power pool, I guess, a pool of utterances. They're your most cosmic powers in Mummy. Now, some of those utterances, I was a big fan of how they were presented in first edition, and so are my writers. And so we maintained a lot. In some cases, we tried to round off some edges. And some people really liked it, some people really didn't. And this is one of those cases where I took a read on fan feedback, and I thought, what here is particularly, well, true, is going to help the game, rather than is just a nitpick or a criticism because I don't like it. If someone can offer me feedback that is constructive and will make the game stronger, and I am able to incorporate that feedback, then I will definitely do it. And there was a lot of fantastic feedback from Mummy, and I'm sure there will be for subsequent chapters too. So what we did with the character creation chapter is, one of the core things people were asking for was more powers, a greater range of powers, make mummies more versatile. And so I spoke to Rich Thomas, creative director at Mummy the Curse, at Onyx Path Publishing. He oversees a lot more games than just Mummy, and said, do we have the budget and the space for more powers? And budget, maybe not. But that's why we set it up as a stretch goal. If we hit this target, we can fund some more powers. We can pull some money from there, pull some strings, get it in there. And if I move some text around, we can fit some more powers in. So ultimately, that's what we've done. We hit that stretch goal. We passed $47,000. And right now, as we speak, I've got a couple of writers working on new powers. It's like you said at the beginning, Onyx Path, myself, James Bell, and all the writers, we really like to engage with the fans. Sometimes it's onerous, no doubt about it. Sometimes it can really be hard work because fans can be passionate, and that means they can be incredibly critical. And no one likes to be told your work is crap. But just the same, we want to do the best job we can. And if people really feel like something needs changing, we're never going to design a game by committee if we can help it, but that doesn't mean we always make the right call as creatives, as artists. Sometimes we need to listen to the audience, and that's why we release the manuscript bit by bit, because we may miss something. In this case, we did.
And we kind of saw that a little bit with V5 and the controversy surrounding some of the content in V5 and how it was not very well received, and that thing that happened, and
those things.
And there were edits made on the tail of that, which is admirable in a way, and a lot of people were okay with that. And then some people and others were upset that those changes were made in the first place instead of just being proud and backing your product.
Yeah, some people hated it, some people really valued it. And honestly, my perspective on the changes made to the Camarilla book, as an example, we can go into it in depth if you want, if the audience wants, but the changes we made to the Camarilla book, I think, were completely necessary. And I don't see them as censorship, as some people do, or that we're silencing the artist or anything like that. That really doesn't ring true to me. It doesn't speak to me as someone who actually understands the way these games are put together, which may sound really egotistical on my part, and I apologize if that is the case. That's certainly not my intent. My view on editing the content was, it never should have been included in the book in the first place. I didn't think that content was good. It wasn't appropriate. And frankly, I was glad to see it go. Whether it's the way it was written, the way it was presented, the way it seemed to have been edited poorly, that was an accusation that got thrown around, or an explanation that was given by a couple of people. I think all of those stand up. But ultimately, that content being excised, I think, makes the book stronger. And sometimes you have to kill your darlings. I know that's something a lot of authors talk about. Often we'll write a character that we really love in a book, but then it turns out that character is a problem for the narrative. And so, you kill your darling, you kill your favorite character, because ultimately it makes the book stronger. And while I doubt that section of the book was anyone's favorite piece, I certainly think it was the right call to make to edit it. Whether White Wolf should have done that sooner, well, yes, they should have done it before the book was released. And why it got released before that was edited out, that certainly wasn't my call to make.
And that's fair. It seemed to be very reminiscent of everything that White Wolf had put out with Vampire up until that point, and there's just been a difference in perspective in those times, and there's been, everything is so at everybody's fingertips to digest and instantly consume and voice their concerns about, that if you did nothing, sure, it would probably go away, but it probably was the right call. And we've got Rufflejacks in the chat who perked up at that for writing the safety rules for V5 along with you.
Yeah, no, she did. In fact, I spoke to Jax. Hi, Jax. When we were initially doing V5 because I felt safety rules were really required, and so I think I spoke to Jax initially. Jason hired her. I didn't have the authority to hire anyone. And Jax wrote some fantastic safety rules for V5, and I think they make the book a hell of a lot stronger for being there. It's a game for mature minds, it's a game with mature subject matter, and that means the best way of handling mature subject matter is to signpost exactly what kind of content is within it and how gaming groups should handle it and what not to handle. Sometimes gaming groups need to move away from certain subject matter because people at the table may not want to play with it. And that's another one of those things that it's not just in gaming, it's in a hell of a lot of media, that you will always get some people that say, well, it's an adult game, it's a horror game, you get what you sign up for. If you can't handle it, you shouldn't be playing. And frankly, I think that opinion is trash. I think that if you go into a movie theater and you decide you're going to watch a horror film and all you know is it's a horror film and you don't think it's going to be torture porn, but it turns out to be torture porn, and that turns your stomach, you prefer suspense, you're more of a Shining person than a Hostel person, and it turns into Hostel, you are not obliged to sit there and carry on watching Hostel just because you paid the price of admission. You are perfectly within your rights to get up and leave. You're perfectly within your rights also, if it was billed another way, to complain and say, this wasn't presented in this way. You have tried to shock me and appall me, and that isn't a good thing to do. So, I mean, a lot of the cases, I don't know whether it's the same globally, but in the UK now, if you're talking about a horror film, you will often get a little advisory at the beginning that says this film contains scenes of blah, 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 which is a very simple form of safety guideline. But why some people are adverse to us containing that kind of warning on tabletop RPGs, I have no idea. It just seems a bit silly to me, to put it mildly. Why can't we just allow everyone to have fun and encourage people to talk about the content of a game before we play it? Right. I don't know, but maybe we're in the minority. Who knows?
And we have ratings like that as well, and they've become more explicit throughout the years. Before, they would just put the letter rating, but now they have those bullet pointed things that you could encounter not only in the film you're about to watch, but in a preview, and they've put it on games as well. And so they're trying to make it you very aware of what you're about to consume. But you're right, if you go in expecting one thing and you get another thing, it can be very off-putting. So to call attention to it early on is not necessarily detrimental. No, then you can have that conversation.
Well, yeah, this is why tabletop RPGs are so fantastic as a collaborative exercise, because while your only option with a movie is to potentially walk out and complain after the fact or be upset after the fact, legitimately so, with a collaborative enterprise, whether it's a tabletop RPG, a live action roleplay, whether you are doing some improvisational theater or something else, anything collaborative, communication exists, or it should exist. So being able to speak to the other players, being able to speak to the person running the game, the storyteller or the director of the play that you're in, that is something that static media that you are just observing does not have. A game should be built to accommodate as best as it can everyone's needs and desires, whilst respecting their limits. So yeah, I think Jax, again, thanks very much for dropping in, Jax, because she has done fantastic work, not only on Vampire, but on Cult Divinity Lost, which is another horror game. And horror games I don't think are weakened at all by having safety guidelines. If you're of the opinion you don't need them, then fair enough, I guess. But don't
Don't
get
share them with your
offended.
players, but
Don't get
when the
offended
creators,
when there is someone who does need them, who does appreciate them.
Mhm.
I don't play rangers as a general rule in D&D, but that doesn't mean I get offended because someone might want to.
They're for everybody, not necessarily tailored just for you, the individual.
Yeah, exactly.
So circling back around to Mummy, anybody that has picked up a Onyx Path, a World of Darkness, any sort of tabletop game knows that the lore is incredibly rich and dense and is seemingly endless, and you can just go down a rabbit hole of researching things. When I first got into Vampire, for example, I started researching these things and I would end up hours later still not finding what I was originally set out to look for, but I learned so much on that journey. Specific to Mummy, do you have any favorite bits of lore that you've developed along the way?
Well, this is a wonderful thing about Mummy and the Chronicles of Darkness. So there's two game lines, World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness. World of Darkness is quite meta plot heavy. And what that means is, as you say, there's a big trove of lore you can dig through and keep digging through for days and days and never get to the end of it. And that's like a mystery box all of its own. Chronicles of Darkness is more of a toolbox. There's very rarely a set origin, a set lore that you must follow in order to adhere to the game. Now, one could argue that the meta plot in World of Darkness is just as optional. Certainly, that's how I present it when I'm running it. But some people really like to cleave to it. With Chronicles of Darkness, it's explicitly a toolbox. Now, Mummy is a strange exception to the rule, because while it is a Chronicles of Darkness game, its first edition definitely had a cemented origin story and even, I guess, arc that played through each source book, so that each book was a follow-up to the last one. It wasn't necessarily a game that was expanding as much as progressing. And there weren't many Chronicles of Darkness source books like that. So there's an awful lot you can read up on from Mummy the Curse First Edition. One of the best books for Mummy the Curse First Edition is Book of the Deceived, which is a book that covers not the primary antagonist of Mummy the Curse, but a very different view of what mummies are, who they're serving, why they're serving. It unlocks one of the biggest mysteries of the game that I won't go into in too much detail. But I will say also, the Book of the Deceived is a very dense book. You really have to be invested in the lore of Mummy the Curse to, I think, really appreciate it. So that aside, I would say one of the best books you can pick up is Dark Eras 2. Not Dark Eras 2, sorry, although Dark Eras 2 is very good. It's back a kit right now. The Dark Eras Companion, which is available to buy on Drive-Thru-RPG, because it presents a couple of historical eras for Mummy the Curse and really starts laying down the groundwork for what Mummy the Curse Second Edition would become, including the Mummy relation to mages from Mage the Awakening, and the Mummy's relation to sorcerers and other immortals. That's all presented in there. So that's quite good fun.
Okay. And again, Mummy is entirely new to me, so I'm learning right along with all of our people in our audience right now. So, so since you have spent some time in the development seat and the writing seat, have you come across any trials that are particularly difficult? And likewise, what are some of your triumphs that you can put on that list of your many, many awards so far?
My many, many awards.
How many did we count? 3 possibly.
Yeah, 3 possibly. I'm sure I didn't make one of those Origins awards up. So I know this is going to sound very bland, but one of the biggest trials for anyone in this industry is to stay constantly creative. When I first started writing and developing RPGs, that was as a part-time job. I would do it in the evenings, I'd do it in the weekends, I'd do it if I had a quiet moment at my full-time job as a trainer. Now that I do it full-time, that means I am permanently writing content. I am permanently developing other people's content. I'm permanently coming up with ideas for new books, new playable options, all kinds of things. And having to do that, I wouldn't say I'm someone that necessarily suffers from writer's block as much as sometimes the fatigue can get to you. And that's probably because someone like me, anyone who does this full time, is going to be self-employed, is likely to be self-employed. We all work on contracts, and while those contracts can be long-term, I'm not a full-time employee of Onyx Path. And just the same as many people who work for companies like, I don't know, Catalyst or Chaosium, I imagine they're not full-time employees. They're probably just on long-term contracts. That means you don't get paid holiday. You probably don't get paid healthcare, and you don't gain the benefits of being a full-time employee. But as you're a contractor, it means you can take work from other companies. There are benefits to it as well. With that in mind, it's very difficult to flick off your own off switch. Sometimes you need to have a break, but it's difficult to judge when you should do it because the work is always there.
Absolutely.
And because you are dependent on that income permanently, you are probably going to be quite afraid to stop working for a while and have a break. I think that's the same, not just in the RPG industry, but any self-employed industry. I'm very good friends with a TV repairman, and he's self-employed. And if he isn't out repairing televisions, he isn't earning anything. So he doesn't give himself many holidays in a year. And it's the same for, I guess, anyone. In terms of my greatest triumphs, there's two I would, I guess, put up there as projects I am very proud of. One is Beckett's Jihad Diary, which is a Vampire the Masquerade source book. I co-developed with Neil Raymond Price. He was the first developer on it. I came in for the second half of the book. And that book is very special to me because I had spent years building up a massive storehouse of vampire lore in my head. I think, as displayed through my videos on my channel, I know a lot about Vampire the Masquerade. That's not egotistical to say, it's true. I do know a lot about Vampire the Masquerade. And Beckett's Jihad Diary was a book specifically designed for a big dump of that information, hopefully laid out in an interesting way. And it's been popular enough for me to feel like, yes, it was laid out in an interesting way. All credit to the artists, all credit to Michael Chaney, our art director, for laying it out in the way it has. It's a brilliant book. The other one is They Came From Beneath the Sea, because They Came From Beneath the Sea is a tabletop RPG that I have seen from conception through to near release. I'm currently proofing the PDF. And that's a game I came up with from scratch. I pitched it to Rich at Onyx Path, and I said, I would love to develop this for your company. Buy it off me. I made a business pitch. Rich purchased the IP, and we have a contract, and so that book was developed. And that's a game that's set in the 1950s. It's B-movie sci-fi. There's an element of horror. There's an element of farce, a big element of farce. In many ways, it's a comedy RPG. Its main purpose is to be fun. And it's a game that specifically caters to groups that just want to laugh at the table. So you have, because it's a B-movie, you have these traits called cinematics that you can activate during the course of the game if you build up enough points to do so. And cinematics can be things like cheap set. let's say you're being cornered by a lobster man, you can use cheap set to elbow your way through the wall and run away as if it was made of paper, because it's a B movie. You can have bad dubbing, where if the lobster men, as an example, to really pick on the lobsters, chattering away in their alien language, one of the players at the table can dub what they're saying, and they can direct the course of play. You can have a missing reel. So let's say Centipus, the 100-tentacled octopus, is about to bear down on the boat containing your heroes. There's no way they can beat Centipus. He's massive. You insert a missing reel. Your characters appear in a different scene some time later. You are never allowed to refer directly to what happened in that scene that allowed you to save your life. You can intimate it. You can say, I've never seen anyone do that with a pineapple before, but you can't ever explain how you got out of that scene because there's a missing reel. Now, you've got all these lovely little tools to make it feel like a B movie. And quite honestly, having run it at conventions a lot, I have never ran a game that's made people laugh more. And that's something really different, because as a designer of RPGs, you come to learn, and just a GM in general, you come to learn that there are various emotions that you may enjoy invoking at the table. Some people really enjoy invoking shock or horror. And one could argue that shock and revulsion are the easiest ones to evoke, because I may be describing the odor that fills the air when you disembowel an orc, and that may take you by surprise when you're playing the Middle-earth RPG, but it may revolt the hobbits at the table. Now, I like to think I've moved on somewhat from that, but the harder emotions to invoke are fear, actual fear, sorrow, and genuine joy. Because fear is a difficult one, because you want the players to be frightened for their characters. And one of my favorite moments in a D&D game I participated in, one of the first games I ever played in, was when our party entered the wrong cave. We were very low level, and there was a beholder floating there. And one of the players said, "Oh shit!" And that, for me, was fantastic, because it showed that he was concerned for what happened to his character at that point, because he knew what this beholder could do. And you can certainly build fear through suspense and through warnings and through paranoia. That can be evoked, but sorrow is hard, because again, you need to get players to invest in their characters emotionally. And Changeling the Lost is very good for sorrow. Wraith the Oblivion is very good for sorrow, because they have an element of horror that's innately relatable, whether it's abduction, whether it's isolation, whether it's death, fatalism. Everyone has some kind of connection to that. Everyone can imagine what it's like, or feel like they can. So outside of that, though, if you're playing a game of Vampire or D&D or even Call of Cthulhu, feeling genuine sorrow at the table can take quite a lot of work. But joy, to get to my point, is again something that can be quite tricky, because feeling satisfaction that you've killed a monster is one thing. Walking away from the table elated that you played, feeling like this game was genuinely uplifting, that you had a fantastic time. It was like you went to a comedy show. That kind of thing, if you can get it, if you can squeeze it out of your players, is like the peak of what I want. And when I run a game, when I write a game, and that is what I feel They Came From Beneath the Sea is really good at getting players to do. It's a game that makes players have fun. And there's so few, or too few, games that are just about having fun. So yeah, that's what They Came From Beneath the Sea is about, and you can currently back it on BackIt.
It sounds amazing. And when is it due to, or when is it projected to be released just to the general public?
I imagine we don't tend to do hard release dates, but I imagine the PDF will go out to the backers. So people who have backed it on Kickstarter, people who pre-order it on BackerKit, it'll probably go out to backers around the end of this year.
Okay.
Which means it should be in print somewhere around Q1 next year.
Well, that's exciting.
So yeah, we'll send the PDF out. We'll get errata from anyone who backed it and has suggestions for amendments. We'll incorporate them into the PDF, and then we will do a print run of it. It will be in stores, which is quite exciting.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat from I'm just going to say Chaos. Will Matthew run They Came From Beneath the Sea games at any convention soon?
So I am running a They Came From Beneath the Sea game at Dragon Meet, which is in London, which I think is either end of November or beginning of December. I should probably check. It's quite close.
We're like mid-November.
Yeah. I will also be running They Came From Beneath the Sea at Midwinter in Milwaukee in the beginning of January. I'll be
Wisconsin?
there along with... Yep.
Oh.
I'll be there along with everyone else from Onyx Path. That's our annual convention. We all go to Milwaukee for the Midwinter Gaming Convention. This year, when I was there, I was interviewed for the local Fox News affiliate. That was an interesting experience. I had to talk about a games convention because I think I was the only person that was up at that time in the morning. So yeah, I was there looking tired, being interviewed for Fox News
in Milwaukee in the winter, which is very cold. And
I certainly learned you don't want to spend more than about 15 minutes outside the hotel at the beginning of January. The bracing wind from off the lake is enough to give you frostbite.
Yes.
In under an hour.
A lot of us from Roll the Roll were Chicago based, so Milwaukee is not a far trek for us. So that would be neat if we could possibly get up there and see some of They Came From Beneath the Sea in action.
Yeah. That would be fantastic.
You've mentioned a couple times play tests. So when it comes to Mummy or They Came From Beneath the Sea, what's some of the stuff that comes out of play tests that you find most valuable? It doesn't have to be anything specific. Just like feedback that you find most valuable. Is it mechanics based? Is it lore based?
It's generally mechanics based, but the most valuable feedback you can get is if you can convince someone who doesn't know the game to run it. I'm very fortunate in that I have something like 4 or 5 regular gaming groups around me that I have good access to. Just where I am in the UK, I can access clubs, I can access shops, I can access my regular weekly gaming group as well. And as long as I bribe them with some food, I'll put on catering for a day. And I always find the investment's worthwhile. It never costs that much. I can get a few tables worth of players playing the same game and then I'll ask them in person to provide feedback because I often find getting them to write things down just doesn't work. And it's one thing for me to run They Came From for lots and lots of groups. But the thing is, because I know the system so well, I know the loose settings so well, I am always going to get the rules right and I know what I'm aiming for. It's better to get someone, explain the rules in brief to them and ask them to go ahead with it and find out how easy they find it to run, how easy they find it to convey the mood of the game. And what I found with They Came From, and this was the thing that was most pleasing to me, was how I could sit in the corner of a club. Role-playing clubs are a big thing in the UK. I understand they're not so much in the US where most games...
No, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah, they're not attached to stores. Usually it's just like a village hall or community centre will be hired out for an evening every week. And 3 or 4 tables worth of gamers will just go there and they'll play a game. And everyone will put money in to do so. Now, I can sit in the corner or walk the floor while 4 different tables are playing They Came From Beneath the Sea. They may all be playing the same scenario, but if all of them are laughing at what's going on, then I can think, okay, so the rules are simple enough. that these people can run it and make people laugh. That's the main objective. After that, any kinks in the rules can be ironed out because I'll get the GM's feedback. But if I can tell that the correct mood is being conveyed, really it doesn't matter to me if they are getting the scale rules or the mixed action rules or something like that correct, because some people will care about it, some people will just care about running a fun game. And one could say the same thing for live streams as well. I'm less interested in seeing every single rule being run with dead-on accuracy and more about seeing the tone of the game being conveyed correctly and excitingly. So yeah, most important thing with playtesting is seeing other people run your game and seeing how they manage to do it.
Mm-hmm. And we ran into some of that when we play tested Trinity. That was a new system for me and a lot of the people in our group at the time, and we had a lot of fun with it, and we provided as much constructive feedback as we could manage. But for someone to go into it or to be able to pick up a game and just jump into it is a really good gauge of how it's going to be received and if there are any changes that are going to be made.
Well, if you enjoyed Trinity, you'll be pleased to know the story path system that Trinity uses is the same system that They Came From Beneath the Sea uses.
Perfect.
So you don't have much to learn. But yeah, genuinely, it can be very difficult for playtesters to just understand, to clamp on to and interpret rules when all they are given is a bare bones manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of tabletop RPGs with the best one in the world are encyclopedias. And by that I mean you're not going to read them from beginning to end like they're a novel. You're going to reference the parts you need. And what that means is the text can come across as dry. We don't like dry text at Onyx Path. We don't like purple text either, which is all over the place with its floweriness that it completely misses the point. You need to get somewhere in the middle. When you provide a playtest GM or players with a Word document printed out and say, learn this, that's like providing someone with a textbook on, I don't know, financial regulation. And I should know, I've got this qualification. I worked in investments at one point, and you had to do various qualifications to get to a certain level, as you do in many career paths. And you would be given this textbook about the Securities and Investments Institute, and you would have to learn this incredibly dry material without any frame of reference, no context, no color. And that's very difficult for playtesters. I appreciate that. But the ones who can do it are worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely. And it's fun to playtest, at least it was for me. So if you don't mind, I wanted to open it up to questions from our Twitch chat. We've posed a couple here and there. Let's see. We have... Oh, okay. We had a vampire related question.
Okay.
And forgive me, I'm always butches Zimichi. Is that
the whole purpose of the Zimichi, Zimichi, is that everyone mispronounces their name.
Perfect.
You are not supposed to necessarily get it right. And what's more, there is absolutely nothing wrong with one person saying Brujar and one person saying Bruja. Words have different pronunciations, different places you are in the world. Look at Paris and Paris. So pronounce Zimitzi however you want. Anyway, what's your question?
There was a question from Rufus in the chat about the future of the Zimichi, specifically related to vampire. I guess they're just wondering where they're going and what is in store for them.
Well, so undoubtedly this clan is going to appear in the Sabbat. and there will be a Sabat book at some point, although who publishes
Promise?
it, who writes it. Yeah, oh yeah, there will be, I have no doubt, but I don't know who will be developing it or writing it. It isn't something I am developing it, I can say that in all candor. And to my knowledge, it's not being worked on, or if it is being worked on right now, it's not something I'm being hired for, and I've no issue with that, frankly. I do know that the clan is may be appearing in a form in the V5 Player's Guide by Modifius, because that was announced. But I also know that it's possible that they may not be in the final released version. It really depends. It really depends on the writing that Modifius does and whether it matches up with White Wolf's vision for the clan. For instance, I know that the Ravnos are not in the V5 Player's Guide, and there's various reasons for that. So I don't know for certainty that the Tzimisce are going to be in the Player's Guide. I think the last I heard, it was maybe, maybe not, but it won't be the Sabat strain of the Tzimisce that would be in there.
Interesting. There seemed to be a lot of Tzimisce love in the chat.
Yeah, who doesn't love flesh crafting monstrosities?
They creep me out, to be honest. All their abilities, I couldn't get into it. It's a morbid, beautiful morbidity that I appreciate from a distance.
I do love the clan, and here's me, but going to be elitist and telling you how to play. No, this is how I play. I don't see them as the clan of psychopaths like some people do. Some people assume that if you're embraced into the clan, you're automatically a flesh crafting, torture obsessed weirdo, and that just doesn't work for me, because there's nothing about the Tzimisce embrace that makes a human automatically turn into a serial killer or a sadist. And vicissitude, the discipline that allows them to do that, is a pretty sadistic discipline to use, especially if you're using it offensively. So that's the main issue I have with the clan. They're often presented as maniacs with no real justification, beyond the fact that they're in the Sabat, which does make some sense. The Sabat brainwashes its fledglings, its neonates, with the Voldery, with the Rite, and after you get through that succession of love bombing and torture and everything like that, your mind may be slightly skewed to, I guess, human perspective, but it shouldn't automatically make you into a hard and fast killer. They're a clan I really enjoy, but I particularly enjoy when people take a more nuanced approach to them, when people treat them as a clan that humans are being embraced into, just like they do most other clans. That's what, for me, makes the Tzimisce interesting.
Jax had a question, and we answered this a little bit. She wanted to know if you'd be coming to Midwinter. We know that you are. Are there any events or panels or anything that you're participating in that you wanted to highlight?
I'll be on the V5 Chicago by Night panel. That'll be fun. So we'll be talking about Chicago by Night. That's another book I'm very proud of. I think we did a fantastic job with it. That's going to be being sent out to its backers very soon and be on general release not that far away either. And we've got a panel to discuss it, because that book is quite an undertaking. We created it in a pretty short space of time. It's one of those little known facts, I guess, that we got Chicago by Night approved very shortly before the release of V5, because we had to be able to refer to V5 to write Chicago by Night. And we already had the Kickstarter going and the manuscript ready for Chicago by Night within about a month of V5's release.
Wow.
So, and that makes it sound like it was rushed. It wasn't. It was just that I spent every waking hour that I could developing it, and the writers really busted their asses making it the fantastic book that it is. It's a book that has hugely benefited from the diversity of its authorial cast, I think. Because Chicago, I love Chicago, glad to know you're from there, is my favorite American city. It's the one, whenever I visit it, I always find something new and fantastic. I love the food, I love the music, I love everything about Chicago. But it was very important to me that we hire people from Chicago, people that are representative of Chicago and culture, and we did that. And it doesn't mean every author is from Chicago. It meant that not only did we get Chicagoans, we also got people who could research the city, and were also from a broad demographic. It meant that the voices we have in our book are authentic, and that for me is very important when doing a city source book.
And the reception has been great. Every tweet, every piece of media I've read about Chicago by Night has been nothing but positive. I'm very excited to get a physical copy of that book to add to my own collection. I might be a little biased since I am from Chicago, but I was super excited, and the art is amazing. I actually stumbled across one of the artists that has done some of the interior art randomly on Instagram, and that's how I came to find out that Chicago by Night was a thing. So it's funny to see how far the ripples spread.
Yeah.
We have a question from WK Winkler. Will Onyx Path support V20 and V5 for the foreseeable future, or as long as there is demand?
So we're not releasing any more V20 books because that's the previous edition of the game, and White Wolf Paradox Interactive, I should say, and I can't disagree with them here, don't see the benefit to potentially confusing the market by releasing books for 2 editions of a game, especially as fewer and fewer people are going to be buying V20 books. That doesn't mean we're not going to be supporting Storytellers Vault releases. Any one of our authors that publishes on Storytellers Vault, we like to occasionally give them a bit of a bump, I guess, publicization, if that's a word, of their work. But in terms of V5, we will continue creating V5 books for as long as we can. Right now, it's all very contractual. Modifius are the, I guess, gatekeepers when it comes to V5, and that means we have to do things like wait on approvals. That's not too unusual. We had to wait on approvals when it was White Wolf who were making these decisions. And so if we can, we will do more V5, but the next big release from us is Cults of the Blood Gods. That's a V5 book that handles religion in Vampire, and I think is probably the first big book of religion that Vampire the Masquerade has ever had. It's again one I'm developing, and the reason that was very important to me is because, as a big fan of the Forgotten Realms, to go completely off-piste, one of my favorite books ever for role-playing games is Faiths and Avatars, which is a 2nd edition AD&D book for the Forgotten Realms. It covers every single deity, every single religion, the interactions between those religions and other religions, their night-to-night or day-to-day practices, where their main centers of worship are, things like that. And it's such a fantastic, dense, but really interesting book. And I wanted to do something like that for Vampire, where we have the Cult of Mithras, the Church of Set, the Bahari, the Church of Cain, the Hecata being the clan of death. They're a big cult of death and eschatology, so the end of the world. And this book is absolutely filled with kindred religion, cults, and a fantastic chronicle that you can pick up and play, including some ready-made characters. In short, Cults of the Blood Gods is looking great, and I can't wait for us to do the Kickstarter for that one.
I'm excited too. There was a question that tailed off of that. So have you experienced, or has Onyx Path, and I don't know if you could speak to on the Modifius side, but has there been any marketplace confusion when it comes to V20 and V5? I feel like V20 has been out for such a long time now that when V5 came along, there wouldn't have been, but I could
No.
be absolutely mistaken.
Nothing to any major degree. I mean, I freelance for Modiphius as well. I've worked on the Fall of London. I worked on the Player's Guide for V5 with them, and there's no one who is holding up V20 and V5, or there's no mass of people and saying which one is the current edition. But you occasionally get people who want to know if this book belongs to this edition or not. And when I say marketplace confusion, I guess to be clear, if we were releasing more V20 books than V5 books, it would appear that we aren't necessarily putting enough support behind the current edition of the game. And most RPGs, in fact, all RPGs I know of, and I stand to be corrected here, when a new edition gets announced, the previous edition, I guess, gets sunsetted, is a word that's sometimes used in this industry, for new releases, because all engines must be fired for the new edition. It makes sense. You want to support the new edition, prop it up, because that's what's going to attract new players and service established players with something new and exciting too. But again, there are plenty of fantastic products coming up on the Storyteller's Vault, so if you like V20, do not despair. There's still lots of content available to you that you probably never read.
So I just want to put on another call to our chat for any questions that you'd like to ask. Matthew has made it clear and been very gracious with us that he's open to a lot of topics, so feel free to put that in there. But while we wait for some additional questions, just to kind of circle back to Mummy a little bit, if there's one place that you would recommend for people that are interested in the game to go check out what they can now before they decide if they want to pledge to the Kickstarter or pick it up when it becomes available in retail, is there some place you would point them towards? I know there was a session on YouTube that was put up that you had recommended to us to watch.
Yes, so yeah, obviously the Kickstarter is worth checking out anyway, because all you have to do is back for $5 and you can access the manuscript. But if you don't want to take that plunge, you can check out Red Moon Roleplay, because redmoonroleplaying.com, or their YouTube channel, I am currently running a game for them every single week. It's going to be a short chronicle of Mummy the Curse. I'm running it not just for Craig from Red Moon Roleplaying, I'm also running it for John Burke and Bianca Savazzi, who are two authors for Mummy the Curse 2nd edition. So this game is set in Paris. The initial session was set in Paris during the French Revolution, and the second session was set in Paris during the Second World War. And we will have to see where that game goes from there. That's not to say every Mummy game, every session has to be set in a different era, but what I'm trying to put across in this actual play is a lot of the fun you can have with Mummy, and so far we have had a lot of fun with it.
What aspect of money, and this is from Plastic Age Plays, also known as Travis, who has been a longtime friend of Roll the Roll. What aspect of Mummy do you wish you were asked about more?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably the playable factions, the guilds, the classes, if you like. Because every single game, not every single game, but so many role players, when they go to a convention or they go to a game store, one of the first things they will look at when they open up a role-playing game is what they get to play. So when I go into an RPG store and I'm a first-time role player, I pick up the player's handbook for D&D. First thing I open it to is the classes or the races. I want to know what elves look like, what wizards look like, and so on. And the guilds in Mummy the Curse 1st edition, I found, and this may be a controversial thing to say, I found one of the weaker parts of the game. Now, I'm a big fan of 1st edition Mummy. It was my very first paid assignment in role-playing was to write on a source book for Mummy the Curse 1st edition, so I do have a lot of love for it. But I do find the guilds very loosely defined. Now, there is a source book, Guild Halls of the Deathless, that goes some way to explaining them. But one of the biggest issues I had, biggest hurdles, was they just didn't sound appealing. The guilds with names like the Markep, the Seshahebsu, the Mesen Nebu, those names don't tell you anything. And their subtitles were things like the engravers, the scribes, the priests, the architects. And that doesn't tell you anything either, because very few people have ever picked up an RPG and thought, I want to play an engraver of the Marquette. I don't know what that means. I need things signposted. So we went a long way in second edition, and all credit to Megan Fitzgerald, because she wrote the guilds, and she writes the playable classes, if you like, for games so well. She did so for the Contagion Chronicle as well, which is another Chronicles of Darkness book I developed. We specifically made the guilds accessible, interesting, relatable. We took the focus away from the Marquette, for instance, from being engravers, because while that may have been what they were 6,000 years ago, now they're mostly known as the spies, the secret police, they're the cloak and dagger guild. The architect guild, the Tef Arbi, are now less about being architects, or as much as they may be city planners, they may be the new pharaohs. They are the rulers. They're the people that want to oversee everything and manipulate everything. So I try to classify, in the sense that each one of them is a class, each of the guilds in second edition, and I feel we really did an excellent job. And the reception to Chapter 1 of Mummy the Cursed second edition has been so great that I think we did our job on that.
Good. And then he had a second question. What do you think is a piece of the system or setting that is overlooked or unhyped or uninteresting?
So something not a lot of people have talked about yet, but I think we'll be talking about when we get there with the manuscript release, is Duat, the Land of the Dead. Because it was established in first edition Mummy that when you descend, when you fall asleep, you essentially undergo a series of trials in the land of the dead, and you are greeted by your judge at the end of it and judged. Were you worthy? Was your last awakening successful? Now, that was all supposed to be in a dream state in first edition Mummy. There were no rules for it. In second edition Mummy, we make it playable. And it's not to take the mystery out of the game. It's to allow you to play Mummy from a different aspect. You have the non-linearity, but you also have the ability to play mummies in Duat and even take your cultists with you if you particularly want. After all, we know mummies have been entombed with their followers before in our history, so hell, why not do it in Mummy the Curse as well? So you have rules and setting for navigating the land of the dead, the kinds of weird and wonderful things and horrible things that you're likely to encounter there, known as fiends as a broad subtype. So yeah, that's something that not a lot of people have spoken about yet, but I think they will be very interested when we get there on the manuscript release.
It's interesting. It almost reminds me of if you're familiar with the book series, the Dresden Files, the Never Never from there. And then in silly Minecraft, where you can go into the name of the world eludes me right now, but it's essentially just out underneath the base world, and there's just a whole bunch of other stuff too. It's like you're playing a whole other game or reading a whole other book.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's a tricky thing to
the Nether.
On.
Thank you, Corinne.
Because Changeling the Lost does this fantastically well with the Hedge and Arcadia, and Wraith the Oblivion does it, where you spend most of your time in the underworld, but sometimes you spend your time in the Skinlands, the land where the living live. So we thought, why not do that with Mummy the Curse as well?
Travis would like to know, does Duat interact with the underworld from Geist?
That is something we will need to explore more fully in a Contagion Chronicle sourcebook that's coming up, and potentially in a Mummy sourcebook that's coming up. There is interaction. but the two are not just spliced together. You're not going to interact with garden variety ghosts in Duat. It's a very specific plane, if you like, that was created for mummies that exists somewhere between the lower depths. So if you like your planar cosmology in a D&D style and a great wheel, it is somewhere stuck in a para-elemental plane or pocket plane that the judges or the Shanayatu, these immortal sorcerer priests, made specifically for your characters. And that means you can thank them for why it's so bloody awful.
So before, if there's, I'm going to put out a last call to our chat for any questions. Oh, I missed one. A very important question. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
I'm not adverse to a Hawaiian. I mean, it's not my favorite pizza. To go back to Chicago, I am a huge fan of Pizzeria Duo. Is probably my favorite pizza place in Chicago. And I love a deep dish pizza. I know they're a bit like a lasagna, a bit like a quiche.
They are.
But what makes them so fantastic is how they taste after a night in the fridge. That is the mark of a good pizza. I find that a lot of thin crust pizzas, the New York style, if I want to eat cardboard in the morning, I've got a pizza box. But if I've got a deep dish pizza, I can reheat it or I can eat it cold, and I probably don't need to eat anything else for the rest of the day. So yeah, I wouldn't put pineapple on pizza if I was eating a pizza in Chicago. If I was, I guess, just trying to find something to fill my stomach one night, I might go for a Hawaiian if there was nothing else on the menu.
Well, next time you're in Chicago, if you want to branch out from Pizzeria Duo, you can check out Lou Malnati's. That's also a local favorite for deep dish pizza. I think surprisingly, a lot of Chicagoans would prefer the thinner pub style pizza than lasagna pizza.
Shame on them.
So again, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. And thanks for being our test subject for kind of a first interview here in Roll the Roll. If you had to, I'm gonna, again, I'll share the links if Corinne, if you want to share the link to the Kickstarter for Mummy again in our chat. If you had to point our audience right now and people that'll listen to this towards anything, a book, a film, anything that you would recommend, a podcast, where would you point them?
Oh God, so many things. So I'm on the Onyx Pathcast every week. That's where myself, Eddie Webb, and Dixie Cochran, we're the in-house developers at Onyx Path. We talk about the projects we're working on. We talk about various aspects of the RPG industry and various projects. So the Onyx Pathcast, you can find that on Podbean and pretty much everywhere else you find nice podcasts. You can also look at MatthewDawkins.com. That has my list of credits on, pretty up to date, I think, although I do need to update my calendar on that website with some of the conventions I'm going to. And let's think of one more. One more thing, I guess, is do check out the onyxpath.com, our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/theonyxpath, for regular streamed content, mostly actual plays, but we'll soon be dropping some Scion rules and setting advice.
Interesting.
And the Mummy the Curse Kickstarter. So that's a lot. But thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to our audience. If you like what we do here, if you've caught our games before, catch us again at Roll the Roll. We're streaming tomorrow at noon Central Time with Scarred Lands. We have an ongoing campaign with that. We've switched up our party a little bit. I was in the initial party and unfortunately had to drop out due to time constraints, but I had a lot of fun while I was doing it. I believe I was a Manticora, and I have a affinity for cats. I've got my own stream cat that's been with us the entire time, but it was fun to actually roleplay one. So join us tomorrow at noon. Come hang out with us in our Discord if you are so inclined, and we're happy to have you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Oh, and we're going to raid. Who are we raiding today? We're going to raid our friends Goldheart Gaming. If you hang out in the chat and just pop in or raid the roll when we get over there. And then we'll be over there in probably about 15 or so seconds.
Oh, well, nice to still be here.
Awkward silence.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching. And do support the Mummy the Curse Kickstarter, please. Give us your backing.
Yay, with my very loud keyboard.